Thank you for joining me in the studio, Mr. Osilama.
Thanks for having me.
Regarding the budget, let's focus on what really borders around the common man on the street. When you talk about inflation, you'd realize that from August up until November, we've seen an increase. We saw it move from 11.23% to 11.28%, 11.26%, and back to 11.28%. Do you think that disbursing this budget for 2019 would do anything, would make any difference?
Well, essentially, a budget is a statement of intent when what the government wants to achieve within a given period, usually 1 year. And the first, of course, is to ensure that the living condition of the people is improved. I mean, that's the whole assumption and what they want to drive towards. So, but issues bordering on inflation, I think we should be a lot more specific around the area of food inflation, right? Because that's what really affects the common man that you are so interested in. Price of our daily needs, goods and services are pretty high. Inflation over a 13-14 months period actually did dip from a high of 18-19%, down to where it is right now, which is good. But I've always averred that that's a contractionary policy that is being driven both by the fiscal leg and the monetary legs, right? Which is not good for growth. So if you are driving inflation downwards, it means growth is going to suffer. And growth, if you're looking at growth, essentially, you're talking about things like employment, right? And the unemployment level is pretty high right now. So to answer your question directly, it's going to be tough, because inflation, single-digit inflation or whatever the government is trying to drive at, it's of no use to the unemployed person out there who cannot meet his or her basic needs. And so we need to look beyond all these, things that are not really, as far as I'm concerned, from my own perspective, not the issues that we should be looking at. Inflation targeting shouldn't be a major focus. What we should be aiming and driving at is growth. Growth
for the country in general. And
exactly.
For the
when we're talking, like I said, when we talk of growth, we're talking about things like develop our infrastructure, right? Which essentially means that the fiscal leg has to, really come to the party. They're not doing that right now.
So it's not much of development right now, but growth is what we should be focusing on.
Growth and development is a thin line, because if your infrastructures are being worked on, it means you are creating jobs, you are creating value chain opportunities down the line. I mean, these are the areas we need to look at essentially, and not play cosmetics with the economy by targeting inflation, driving it down, when at the end of the day, the purchasing power of the average Nigerian is reduced. It's not anything to write home about.
All right, so let's also move a bit to the oil sector. The expected daily output is at 2.3 million barrels per day. That's what was estimated for the 2019 budget. The same thing that was estimated for 2018 budget, but it wasn't even met for the 2018 budget. What they were able to meet up with was 1.9 million barrels per day. So what do you think about this?
Well, I think in answering your question, we need to even look at where we are right now. OPEC has pegged Nigeria's daily production to 1.69%. Let's even say 1.7. What that essentially means, and this decision came out on the 7th of this month. And I'm surprised that this budget was read 2 days ago. That was not factored in. So from the get-go, it means that we're already running a deficit budget. If you go contrary to what OPEC has mandated you to, it means that you are breaking certain rules and understandings or conventions that you signed to. And if you don't want to play by their rule, it means that you have to do what Qatar did, exit OPEC. So these are the issues. But like you rightly pointed out, we didn't achieve 2.3
million barrels per day
in
for 2018.
Even 2017 it was 2.1. We didn't even get close.
So why do you think we are still trying to project achieving what we know we did not achieve without a plan implemented, especially with the fact that right now, as the agreement with the OPEC during their meeting on the 7th of December, it said Nigeria was supposed to reduce about 3-point-something% of their existing production.
I will take you back to 2011. As at 2011, we're producing 3 million barrels per day. So the issue is not capacity. I even suspect that we are even achieving far more than the 2.1, 2.3 that is being bandied around. Because we did it in 2011. Yeah, there were issues boring around restiveness in the Niger Delta, but for a while now, the place has been peaceful and calm. Does it mean that our equipment are no longer there to drill and get the oil, or we don't have the necessary manpower? I think, I might be wrong, but I have some issues with the operations of the NNPC. The NNPC is very opaque and corrupt. You find out that to a very large extent, they can't even give account of some of these crude that I mean we're actually getting from us. So I think that's one area we need to look at. If as at 2011 we were getting up to 3 million barrels per day, and now there's so much peace in the Niger Delta region, even 65 billion has been budgeted for them. The amnesty program and all. So
who should we put the blame on right now? Is there a problem with our regulatory body?
I think this is where I agree with one of the presidential candidates of the forthcoming election. NNPC has to be unbundled. Like I said, it's a cesspool for corruption. The operations are opaque. There's no transparency. I think NNPC should be made to play the role essentially of a regulatory body, just like the CBN is doing for the banks. Let the private sector drive the oil sector. Just like we have the private sector, just like you have the private sector driving the financial services sector. It will make a lot of difference. But just make the NNPC the regulatory body, like the central bank is doing for the financial services sector, especially the deposit money banks. And I think we'll see a lot of difference and growth in that area.
But then do you think that the private sector individuals will be able to carry on the ways that NNPC is currently carrying?
Would you have expected that the private sector would drive telecoms in Nigeria? When NITEL was to be unbundled, there was so much hue and cry about unbundling it. But look at where we are today. Our tele-density has improved. The quality of, communication has improved. It has even gone beyond just talking. It has gone into even financial service transactions. There's so much you can do with your phone. Banking transactions. The only thing you can't do is to draw money from your device. So we shouldn't be afraid of taking certain bold steps and decisions. If it worked in the telecom sector, doing quite well in the banking sector, I don't see why oil and gas should. Like I said, the reason is because a few people are benefiting from our commonwealth, and they don't just want to let go.
Oh, okay. In the crux of the 2019 budget rests a lot on economic diversification, inclusive growth, and sustainable development. How feasible do you think this is?
These are just words that are being bandied around. These are just semantics. What do they mean? Diversification. You want to diversify to agriculture, right? Okay. Now let's look at the agricultural sector, which is actually supposed to be the largest employer of labor. But you see, if you look at the GDP contribution of agriculture to the Nigerian economy, when next to oil and gas, well, it hovers between 23 to 25%. That is not good enough. Now, even with the successes that the government is celebrating right now, just a few days ago, 2 days ago, I think, the central bank had the Gala 9 celebrating the Anchor Borrower scheme and stuff like that. When you go to the market, you don't have anything to celebrate. Inclusive growth. The different sectors, a whole lot of the sectors are struggling. The manufacturing sector is struggling. Huge unemployment around that axis. capacity utilization is very poor. In fact, according to the African Development Bank, in the last couple of years, manufacturing has dipped in Nigeria by 45%. And that's speaking volume.
That's a lot.
So these are the things that have snowballed into the very high unemployment levels that we are having, and especially within and around the youth demographic, and it's not good for the economy, you know. So we need to go beyond just throwing words around, you know, buzzwords and stuff like that, and really get down to the brass tacks. Identify certain key sectors and drive transactions through them. And again, we need to be realistic with our projections and expectations. I have a challenge with us focusing so much on recurrent expenditure. If you look at the budget as it is right now, recurrent expenditure is about 50%.
That's
right?
For
the 2019. Yeah, I mean the budget is 8.83 trillion. 400 billion less the 2018 budget, 9.21 trillion. So, and then again, debt servicing is 2 trillion, about 2.14 trillion. And then capital expenditure for capital budget is let's say 2 trillion. How do you grow? How do you develop your economy if your capital expenditure, your budget for capital expenditure
is lower than
is even half your
recurrent costs?
Recurrent is essentially, let's eat and drink. You pay salaries, emoluments, ESTA codes.
They are not
monies that are meant to build,
money.
to develop your infrastructure, your roads, your schools, your hospitals. You know, it's just 25% of the budget. Now, that is not even the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter is, I read a few days ago that about 185 billion naira has been returned back to the federal coffers. These are monies that were supposed to be used for capital expenditure. That of recurrent expenditure is still ongoing and all well and good. Now, the question I'm asking is, are our roads better today? Our hospitals better? Our schools better? To necessitate such huge amount of money being returned to the coffers. And that's not all. At the end of the day, from what the the budget office is expecting, it might get up to 400 billion plus. And that might be the reason why there's a dip by 400 billion naira. Because the question of what they will be looking at is, okay, if such amount of money wasn't utilized, why are we still factoring it into the 2019 budget? We might as well back that out. You know, that is one. Another thing is, even with the meager amount that is budgeted for capital expenditure, at the end of the day, utilization is less than 30%. So that's a major challenge for me as an emerging frontier developing.
So you're saying that already we are already seeing it, red lights,
the way we are structured, we are structured to fail. A whole lot of things need to change. And I've adduced or averred that this is not going to make me popular, but I'm not afraid to say it. The public sector is over bloated. We need to reduce the staff strength by at least 50%. There's so much inefficiency in that area. You know, reduce the public sector, and then that, of course, will reduce the amount of money that is being budgeted year in, year out for recurrent expenditure, and then divert those monies to the
And we hear that their taxes are not, some in the public sector do not pay their taxes.
No, I want to believe that with the arrangement on ground right now, because if you look at the revenues generated in 2018, you know,
it was higher.
Oil and gas actually contributed a whole lot, which is expected, right? And then a major chunk of it, again, did come from corporate income tax, withholding tax, VAT, pay as you earn. You know, so yeah, some of these monies, some of these taxes can actually be applied at the source of making salary payments. So you might not really have control over that. In the area of taxation, the government has done pretty well. It's done very well. But again, too, we need to be very careful in that regard, because we should ensure that our tax is not burdensome, such that companies are, you have multiple taxation that will impact negatively on their operations. And the question at some point they will ask is, if we're bearing such huge, tax burden, probably we should either fold up or move to some other country where it's a lot lenient, and we are seeing that happen. And so it makes no sense for you to get so much at a go without putting into cognizance the fact that you don't kill the chicken that lays the golden egg. So we need to be very careful in that regard. I've, as much as talked about that, different forum opportunities that I've had. It's good. Companies that have not been paying tax, we should drive tax through them, ensure that they meet their corporate social responsibility and all that. Give back to the society that you're benefiting from. But we need to be mindful of how we apply our tax regime.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.